A powerful man is never shaped by the expectations of the world around him because he understands a simple truth. The crowd does not hate what is different, it hates what it cannot command. From the moment he begins to rise, whether in strength, intellect, discipline, or ambition, he becomes a disturbance to the comfortable order that ordinary people rely on. His presence alone disrupts the quiet rhythm of mediocrity that most have accepted as life. The powerful man does not seek this separation. It forms naturally around him. As he sharpens his mind, refines his habits, and elevates his standards, he moves further and further away from those who live content with distractions, excuses, and illusions of importance. This distance is not an act of rejection. It is an automatic consequence of choosing a path few dare to walk. To others, it appears as if he is deliberately isolating himself, but in reality, his evolution creates a gap that the average person cannot cross. People feel uncomfortable around someone they cannot easily understand. The powerful man speaks a language built on purpose, clarity, and intention, while most communicate through impulses, emotions, and social conformity. This difference generates misunderstandings that grow into resentment. Whenever he enters a room, conversations shift, postures stiffen, and eyes narrow. He becomes an unspoken reminder that those around him are capable of more, but have chosen less. This silent challenge he represents is what makes the crowd nervous. They cannot predict his next move. They cannot guess his motives. They cannot decode his silence. And what cannot be predicted cannot be controlled. This is why they keep their distance, not realizing that he, too, prefers the peace of solitude over the noise of shallow company. The powerful man walks alone because he recognizes that blending in requires surrendering his identity. The moment he tries to fit in, he must dull his sharpness, weaken his focus, and slow his pace. People bond over comfort, over shared fears, over mutual limitations. If he were to join them, he would have to pretend those limitations apply to him as well. He would have to silence his ambition to soothe their insecurities. He would have to act modest not because he lacks ability, but because showing it would offend those who refuse to develop their own. This is a price he will never pay, because he values progress more than approval. His separation, therefore, is not loneliness. It is liberation from the suffocating expectations of average minds. Ordinary people rely on belonging as a source of identity, but the powerful man builds his identity from within. He does not chase validation because validation from the crowd is always unstable, always conditional, always tied to obedience. He knows that the same people who applaud conformity will punish individuality. The same ones who praise honesty will demand silence when the truth becomes inconvenient. The same ones who claim to respect strength will secretly hope it fails so they can feel superior again. He sees through these contradictions and refuses to bend to them. His independence becomes his shield, and his distance becomes his fortress. The crowd interprets his quiet confidence as arrogance. They label him cold because he does not seek their approval. They call him difficult because he refuses to participate in their trivial conversations and meaningless dramas. But what they truly dislike is the fact that he does not need them. His self-reliance exposes their dependency on others for emotional security. His discipline highlights their lack of control. His ambition reveals their complacency. Being around him forces them to confront their own choices, their own weaknesses, their own unrealized potential. Instead of facing that discomfort, they choose to keep him at a distance, to misunderstand him, to invent narratives about him that ease their insecurity. He walks alone because solitude sharpens him. In the quiet, he becomes more aware of himself, his strengths, his flaws, his desires, his direction. There is no noise to distract him, no opinions to sway him, no expectations to confine him. Solitude becomes the place where he refines his strategy, strengthens his will, and prepares his next move. While the crowd seeks entertainment to escape their minds, he seeks silence to conquer his. While they chase acceptance, he chases mastery. While they fear being alone, he fears wasting his potential among people who do not think beyond the present moment. Those who fear what they cannot control avoid him, but he does not see this as a loss. A powerful man understands that fitting in is not a sign of strength, but a sign of dependence. He is not interested in shrinking himself to make others comfortable. He is not interested in dimming his fire so others can pretend their candles glow brighter. He knows that those who fear him today will respect him tomorrow, not because he sought their approval, but because he proved that he did not need it. A powerful man understands that every moment he spends trying to belong is a moment stolen from his mission. Acceptance is a currency he has no interest in earning because he knows its value is unstable, easily manipulated, and controlled by people who have no clarity of their own. Instead of chasing the comfort of being liked, he chooses the discomfort of being driven. Purpose becomes his compass, his foundation, and his silent ally. While others bend themselves into shapes that please the crowd, he forges himself into someone the world eventually cannot ignore. And this devotion to purpose, rather than acceptance, is what sets him apart so early in his journey. From a young age, he senses that blending in is the first step toward losing himself. The crowd encourages sameness, not greatness. It rewards obedience, not originality. It uplifts those who play safe, not those who dare to disrupt the limits placed on them. He sees how people shrink their dreams to fit inside the expectations of their environment. He watches them sacrifice potential for the small prize of belonging. He notices how they avoid discomfort because they fear judgment more than failure. These observations teach him that fitting in is the fastest way to be forgotten, and so he chooses a more difficult path, prioritizing purpose even when it isolates him. While others crave social comfort, he craves clarity. He would rather walk alone with a sharp vision than walk with many who have none. This clarity gives him a level of inner peace that the crowd cannot understand because their identities depend on external approval. They change themselves depending on who is watching, shifting their opinions, behaviors, and boundaries to maintain social acceptance. But a powerful man refuses to be molded by the insecurity of others. He holds a steady direction even if it means becoming the outsider. His values, his mission, and his long-term goals do not bend simply to make the crowd more comfortable around him. He realizes early that acceptance comes with hidden costs. To be accepted, he must dilute the very qualities that make him powerful. If he is too ambitious, he is called intimidating. If he is too focused, he is called obsessive. If he refuses distractions, he is called antisocial. If he demands excellence, he is called harsh. The crowd does not dislike these traits because they are harmful. They dislike them because they reveal what they lack. To gain their approval, he would have to lower his standards, silence his hunger, and pretend he is satisfied with an ordinary life. But his purpose is too large to be squeezed into such limitations. Purpose gives him a sense of direction that is immune to the opinions of others. When he pursues something meaningful, the noise of judgment becomes irrelevant. People may misunderstand his solitude, misinterpret his focus, or even mock his discipline, but none of it can divert him. He is not driven by applause, compliments, or social validation. He is driven by an internal fire that does not dim when unnoticed and does not brighten when praised. This independence makes him unshakable, and because of that, he cannot fit into environments built on conformity. The crowd often fears or criticizes what they cannot control, and a man devoted to purpose is the most uncontrollable force among them. They cannot predict him because his actions are guided by long-term vision, not short-term emotion. They cannot influence him because he does not need their approval to proceed. They cannot distract him because he has built the discipline to resist temptation. His devotion to purpose makes him unmanageable, and people who cannot manage you will always struggle to accept you. Instead of embracing his strength, they try to undermine it. Instead of supporting his mission, they question it. Instead of admiring his focus, they label it as extreme, but he does not resent them. He simply understands that he is pursuing something they have never attempted, building a life based on intention rather than social comfort. He knows the crowd judges what it does not understand, and so their opinions carry no weight in his decisions. The only judgment that matters to him is whether he is becoming the man he wants to be. Every distraction he rejects, every comfort he refuses, every invitation he declines is not an act of arrogance, but an act of protection. He protects his vision from dilution, his mind from noise, and his future from those who are content staying where they are. Purpose requires sacrifice, and sacrifice naturally isolates him from those who avoid it. While they rest, he works. While they gossip, he studies. While they waste time, he builds. While they settle, he elevates. These differences create a distance, but it is a distance he welcomes because it keeps him aligned with his destiny. He is not afraid of walking alone because he knows loneliness fades, but regret scars a man forever. By choosing purpose over acceptance, he ensures that every step he takes carries meaning, strength, and direction. And as he climbs, those who once judged him will eventually watch him. Not because they finally understand a powerful man rarely intends to intimidate or unsettle anyone. Yet his presence alone has a way of revealing truths people spend their entire lives trying to hide. He becomes a mirror that exposes insecurities, fears, and shortcomings in the people around him. This is why he never truly fits in. The moment he steps into any room, the quiet illusions people hold about themselves begin to crack. Without speaking, without boasting, without even trying, he forces people to confront the parts of themselves they have abandoned, neglected, or denied. And because most people would rather protect their comfort than face their truth, they reject him long before they understand him. When a man embodies strength, discipline, and direction, he becomes a threat to those who lack all three. His confidence is not arrogance. It is the natural result of mastering himself. But for those who have never learned to control their impulses, his calm feels overpowering. For those who rely on validation, his independence feels cold. For those who disguise insecurity with loudness, his silence feels judgmental. He does not speak to belittle them, yet they feel belittled. He does not compete with them, yet they feel challenged. This reaction has nothing to do with him and everything to do with what he forces them to see about themselves. People who live without self-awareness depend on the illusion that they are already enough, already strong, already admirable. They construct a fragile identity built on denial, excuses, and emotional shortcuts. When they encounter someone who has done the inner work they avoided, it breaks the illusion. They are suddenly aware of their wasted time, their lack of discipline, their stagnant ambitions. These realizations create discomfort, and instead of using that discomfort as motivation, they turn it into resentment. It becomes easier for them to accuse the powerful man of being too serious, too intense, or too distant, than to admit they have been living far below their potential. The powerful man becomes a symbol of everything they are not willing to become. His presence highlights the gap between who they are and who they could be. This gap is painful because it exposes the truth that they chose comfort over growth. They chose distraction over purpose. They chose excuses over evolution. And so they retreat, criticize, or distance themselves from him not because he is wrong, but because he reminds them of the person they failed to be. Their dislike is a mask for their disappointment in themselves. Many people prefer relationships where they can feel superior, needed, or validated. But the powerful man creates the opposite dynamic. His self-sufficiency means he does not need anyone to complete him, impress him, or entertain him. This alone exposes the emotional dependency many rely on. They are uncomfortable around someone who is internally whole because it forces them to see how incomplete they are. They are confused by someone who does not seek approval because it exposes how heavily they depend on it. They are unsettled by someone who does not crumble under pressure because it exposes how fragile they are inside. His stability shakes the foundation of their insecurity. Weak people cling to groups to feel stronger. They rely on gossip, alliances, and herd mentality to give themselves a sense of power. But the powerful man moves differently. He does not compete for attention or dominance within the crowd. His presence alone shifts the dynamics because he does not need the group to validate his identity. This independence threatens the structure of social circles where everyone depends on one another's weaknesses to feel better about themselves. He refuses to play the game, and because of that, the game reveals itself for what it is: a collection of insecurities struggling to appear confident. Even those who admire him may secretly envy him. They look up to him because he represents the version of themselves they dream of becoming, but cannot sustain the discipline to achieve. His achievements serve as proof that their excuses have no weight. His resilience proves that their fears could have been overcome. His progress exposes that their stagnation was a choice, not a destiny. Instead of being inspired, many choose jealousy as a defense mechanism. Admiration from afar quickly turns into resentment up close, because the closer they get to him, the more obvious their own shortcomings become. He is often misunderstood because people interpret his lack of neediness as lack of warmth. They confuse his strategic mind with manipulation. They mistake his emotional control for indifference. But none of these interpretations are accurate. They are simply the reflections of people who do not understand themselves. They cannot comprehend his depth because they have never reached their own. They cannot understand his restraint because they have always acted impulsively. They cannot accept his silence because they fear the truths that silence may reveal. A powerful man does not try to expose the weaknesses of others. It happens naturally because strength always highlights fragility. Clarity always exposes confusion. Authenticity always reveals pretenders. When people sense that they cannot hide their flaws around him, they withdraw or push him out. Not because he judged them, but because being near him forces them to judge themselves. His presence becomes a standard they are afraid to measure themselves against. They avoid him not out of hatred, but out of fear. Fear of seeing their own reflection without the comforting distortions they have relied on for so long. A powerful man rarely begins his journey surrounded by applause, admiration, or understanding. In the early stages of his rise, he is more likely to face silence, doubt, and distance. The world does not immediately embrace someone who refuses to conform, someone who aims higher than what is considered reasonable, someone who chooses discipline where others choose comfort. The path that leads to power is narrow, steep, and often invisible to everyone except the one walking it. Before the world recognizes him, it misunderstands him. Before it respects him, it questions him. Before it follows him, it resists him. This is the natural law of power. Isolation comes first, recognition comes last. He begins with nothing but a vision, an idea too large to fit inside the minds of the people around him. Those who live without purpose cannot comprehend someone who lives with relentless intention. They see his ambition as a threat because it makes their own mediocrity harder to justify. They label him unrealistic, arrogant, or strange because they lack the courage to chase something bigger than themselves. At first, he tries to explain his dream, hoping others will understand. But as he grows, he learns a painful truth. People are not blind. They simply refuse to see anything that forces them to question their own choices. So he stops explaining and starts building in silence. This silence becomes his training ground. Alone, he learns the discipline that others avoid. He learns to push through doubt without encouragement. He learns to trust his own judgment when no one else believes. He learns that the world only supports results, never the process. In this isolation, he develops a strength that cannot be taught by society. Strength of mind, strength of character, strength of direction. He discovers that solitude is not punishment, but preparation. It is the crucible where vision turns into resolve, where intention becomes action, where the future begins to take shape. People misunderstand him most during this stage because they cannot see the transformation happening inside him. They do not witness the hours he invests, the sacrifices he makes, the battles he fights with himself. They only see that he is withdrawing from the social world they cling to. They take his distance personally, not realizing that he is not rejecting them. He is choosing himself. He is choosing growth over noise, purpose over pleasure, discipline over distraction. And because they have never chosen these things, they assume no one else should either. Their misunderstanding becomes criticism, but their criticism becomes fuel. His isolation deepens as he becomes more focused. The things that once appealed to him no longer hold value. The conversations he entertained feel empty. The people he surrounded himself with no longer align with his trajectory. He outgrows environments long before he outgrows his potential. This creates a gap between him and the world that widens as his inner strength expands. Some see this as loneliness, but for him, it is liberation. In the absence of external voices, he begins to hear his own clearly. In the absence of constant social influence, he forms unshakable identity. In the absence of external approval, he develops internal certainty. The path to power demands a level of self-trust that cannot coexist with the desire to fit in. Fitting in requires compromise, compromising beliefs, standards, and dreams. But power requires clarity, clarity in action, clarity in purpose, clarity in values. When he chooses clarity, he naturally drifts away from those who choose comfort. They cannot understand him because they have never confronted themselves deeply enough to understand their own purpose. Isolation becomes the price he pays for authenticity. Eventually, the transformation becomes visible. The discipline that once made him seem strange now becomes the reason for his results. The silence that once made him seem distant now becomes the aura of someone who cannot be shaken. The focus that once made him a misfit now becomes the signature of mastery. People begin to notice, then admire, then imitate him. The same crowd that once whispered about him now speaks of him with respect. The same people who doubted him now seek his guidance. The same ones who walked away now wish they had stayed. But by the time recognition arrives, he no longer needs it. He has already built himself without applause, without approval, without support. Recognition becomes a byproduct, not a requirement. Those who once misunderstood him now call him disciplined. Those who once doubted him now call him visionary. Those who once avoided him now wish to stand beside him. But he has learned something powerful along the way. Those who fail to see your value in your silence do not deserve to celebrate your success in your noise. The isolation that marked the beginning of his journey becomes the reason he stands above the crowd. It taught him resilience, patience, and independence. It made him immune to manipulation and unaffected by criticism. It forced him to build a foundation so strong that no external force could shake it. In the end, the recognition that once seemed so distant arrives with undeniable force, but only after he no longer seeks it. The path to power is always walked alone in the beginning, because greatness must first be proven to oneself before it can be seen by others. A powerful man never fits in because he was never meant to. The crowd fears him because they cannot predict him. Society distances itself because he refuses to trade his purpose for acceptance. His presence exposes truths people are desperate to avoid, and his ascent demands an isolation most will never have the courage to face. The path he walks is not paved with approval, but with discipline, sacrifice, and a relentless devotion to becoming more than what the world expects. Only when he has already built himself in silence does the world finally attempt to understand him. But by then, he no longer seeks their approval, their comfort, or their companionship. His power was forged in solitude, strengthened through resistance, and revealed only when he no longer needed to fit in. This is why powerful men stand apart. They do not rise by belonging to the crowd, they rise by outgrowing it.